All right, we all good?
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we do a behind the scenes look and get some perspectives of life on the street. We have 4 great panelists here with us today, and I just want to give them each an opportunity to introduce themselves, but I guess I should introduce myself first. I am Michelle Connor, and I'm the CEO of Giving Grace. I've been working in this area for about 6 to 7 years now, and so I thank you for letting me moderate this this panel. So here we go. I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves. Let's start off with Liz. She is a licensed social worker with the Denton County Veteran Services. Liz Emerson, will you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Liz Emerson. I work at the Denton County Veteran Service Office, and I am a clinical social worker. Happy to be here today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Scott Butler is the Director of Street Outreach at Giving Grace. Will you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Scott, Street Outreach Director with Giving Grace. I've been here since July of last summer. I started volunteering with Giving Grace. At the time was Giving Hope back in 2016. I was working for the police department at that time, and the police department paired up with some outreach workers from Giving Hope, and we went out and kind of did our own outreach thing, and it kind of grew organically. 3 years ago at the police department, they saw the need for more resources for this situation. So chief of police made myself and another officer full-time street outreach workers as police department, which was great. And we did some great work, but we kept partnering up with Giving Grace and doing work with them. And then back in July of last summer, I transitioned from the police department working for Giving Grace full-time as a street outreach director.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Now, Amanda Conway is a former educator and foster parent. Thank you for joining us. Can you give a brief introduction?
Yes, my name, as she said, is Amanda Conway. Formerly a high school teacher and foster parent with most of my background is in human development and social services with my master's in family life education. And I'm the one in this group that volunteered saying, I've got experience with homelessness. In 2016, my husband and I left a domestic violence situation and had to flee our home in West Texas. So for several months we were homeless, traveling just to the farthest point we could go.
Well, Amanda, thank you for being on to share with us today your experiences. So,
thank you.
And next we have Melanie Meyering, and she is the Director of Homeless Resources at Metro Crest Services. Can you give us a little introduction?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Melanie Meyering. I work at Metro Crest Services here in Carrollton. Carrollton, Farmers Branch, Addison, and Coppell are the 4 cities that we serve. I've been in this capacity here with Metro Crest Services since December of 21. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about what this looks like in our area. So I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you, Melanie. And let's just jump in. We have a couple questions just for those of you that are joining us. We have a couple questions that we're going to ask each panelist and give them the opportunity to answer. And then we will take questions from the audience. So if anybody has questions, you can put those in there and I will address those towards later towards the end. And we'll do what we can to address as many as possible. So let's just start and I'll let my panelists decide who wants to jump in first. But the first question is to you. What are the 2 biggest obstacles that people living unsheltered face daily? Anybody want to go first?
I'll go first, just make it less awkward. I will say what I've seen over the years, the biggest problem for a lot of these folks living unsheltered is, one, lack of affordable housing. I don't think it takes a whole lot of people not familiar with Denton to realize that lack of affordable housing is a huge obstacle. A lot of our folks, get some sort of income through disability or different various things, some work, but the cost of rent is just outrageous, and it's a very big challenge. The other challenge that I see day in, day out, is mental health and substance abuse. It is a giant problem. It's usually co-occurring disorders, but almost everyone I've met with over the years, hundreds and hundreds, all suffer in some shape or degree from mental health and or substance abuse. And there's just a really lack of resources, not just in Denton, but in the state of Texas, but a lot of lack of funding for mental health issues and substance abuse. It's something we need to get better at as a community, because so many of these folks suffer with it every day.
And I'll kind of piggyback on what Scott said. I had the privilege of being the first coordinator for the street outreach program in Denton County when we finally recognized we needed to have a street outreach program, and it was pretty bare bones. It's really cool to see what it's grown into, and I'm just honored to be on this panel with Scott and some of my other colleagues. But I would say all of our services, with the exception of street outreach, are not set up for people experiencing homelessness. All of the challenges that they have are not really considered in people's day-to-day work. So our medical settings, like Scott mentioned, mental health and physical health, there's housing services are not really set up for people in crisis to be able to navigate the amount of documentation that we require upfront for folks. You know, and it can go in any area. Like I said, medical, housing, food services, nothing's really set up for people that don't have a home base to start, or a mailing address, or a phone number. So that's kind of what I would say. The only services that we have that are set up specifically for people experiencing homelessness are street outreach.
I'll piggyback on what Scott and Liz have said, and that if I was to answer that individually, it would be obviously obtaining critical documents and being able to access the services. I think so if I did ditto to what Scott said and ditto to what Liz said, and you put that in it, together, a lot of that is, if you don't have the ability to go to shelter, if there's a shelter bed for you and you don't have the critical documents to get in, then we are tasked with finding people and getting them housed literally from the street. And then you have to find them. If they have a phone, then they're easier to get a hold of because they have a phone number. So I think what happens is that what people think might be an easy system, well, you just order the documents, ends up being weeks and weeks of struggle to get one piece of document, so you can get another piece of the document, so you can get another one to even access a shelter. And if there isn't a shelter bed, then holding on to that until you come up on a housing list and can get placed. So the issue just continues to be compounded. And if you are lucky enough to not be struggling with any kind of substance abuse or any kind of mental illness, it's still incredibly difficult to put all of those pieces together to be able to work in the systems that are they're supposed to be helping you, but they're not really designed to, because they require so much documentation and so much stuff up front, even to be able to help move you forward.
Perfect. So I hear kind of a continuing theme of lack of documentation and lack of just affordable housing, just ability to access the services that are there. It's more difficult if they are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. Amanda, can you talk a little bit from your perspective, having walked through some unsheltered homelessness, what some obstacles that you faced?
Yeah, I have kind of a different perspective on it instead of the professional side. I had a lot of the resources, like I had a master's degree in social services. I knew who to call. I knew where to go. You call 211, whatever city you go to, and that's who you call. But they didn't offer, so since ours was specifically domestic violence, we thought, we might be able to get some services for that. But my spouse was a safe person. It was domestic violence in the sense that it was a household member. So I couldn't stay in a woman's shelter because I had a spouse that was male and he was a safe partner. So we chose mostly to camp in our tent. Some nights in our car, but mostly camping. Like the biggest obstacles day to day were just how expensive it is to live without a home. Like the logistics of it is just such a major project. It's like it is its own full-time job to be homeless. Like, where am I going to stay tonight? Where do I hide my stuff? If I need to go someplace, where am I going to use the toilet or wash myself? If I do have a job interview, like, where am I going to get mail? I can't apply for a job if I don't have an address, and it makes me look pretty unstable. Like, people don't want me getting that involved in work if I'm going to be bringing things to work every day, like a bag, or having to wash my body at work, which would have worked out, being at someplace like getting work at the YMCA again, like I did in college. Just even things like, where will I keep food and water? Like, people want to give homeless meals, but if you don't have a refrigerator, there's really no place to keep that. If you don't have storage space that's safe, like, even though we had our safe documents, it was like, oh, I just hope nobody breaks into the car, because that's where everything is right now.
Amanda, thank you from that perspective. I think sometimes it's easy to take for granted some of the things like taking a shower or cleaning yourself before you go into a job interview, those type of opportunities. And it is hard for someone to find a job if they can't shower before they go to an interview. And so those type of things, thank you for bringing that perspective to it. So our second question is, what is one thing that you wish people in the community could know or could think about when they see someone living unsheltered? Anybody want to go first?
I'll go first. I'm never afraid to talk. I think for me, and with all the folks that we meet outside and work with and really have the privilege to get to know, I wish people realize that what appears isn't always what is actually happening. The folks that we work with outside that are unhoused know exactly who they are. And when a gentleman that I had been working with last Friday looked at me and he said, I know how people see me when I'm asking for money on the street. He said, I know what I smell like. And people say really rude things to me. What folks don't know is that he has cancer and it's eating his insides, and he has problems with toileting, but he knows who he is. He is working to get out of that situation, and we're doing as much as we can for him. But I think it's easy to drive by in our cars and see people outside and see trash around a tent, or to see a car that's full of stuff and people are staying in it and have a judgment on that from just driving by, and don't always stop to wonder how it is that people got there, that there's a story behind that. And oftentimes it's a lot of circumstance that happened to them, not that they were choosing that. And so many people I will hear say, well, people choose to live like that. I don't know a lot of people that are living outside that choose that. I think sometimes once they've been out for a long, long time, it seems easier to stay there than to go through everything to get housed. But that would be my wish, that people would pause and maybe just ask a few questions before they that switch goes off in their head that says, oh, look at them, they just need to go get a job.
I think I'll echo some of that sentiment. I think what became apparent to me as I started working and talking more and more with people living on the street is, yeah, a lot of what you said, Melanie. People have to realize they're normal folks like me, like you, like anybody else. they've had some bad decisions. We've all made bad decisions and have some bad luck. Some of them have circumstances beyond their control, but everybody's somebody's child. And at one point they had hopes and dreams too. They've just taken a wrong turn somewhere and they need help. And I have found the biggest thing to do is treat them like a human being. And it was amazing seeing, the light in people's eyes when you just treat them with a little bit of dignity and respect. And sometimes, like Melanie said, they get talked to and they know how they're perceived, but they're still just regular folks and they have to constantly battle that. And just treating them like human being has gotten me farther with anybody out in the community than ever before. Just treat them like I would anybody else. And I think that's how, in essence, we all want to be treated anyway. But I think if anybody out in the public can extend that, that's somebody having a hard time. They're just like me, just like you, just like anybody else.
I would say for me, I just wish people, I echo the other panelists and just some validation and understanding and sympathy towards people going through such a hard time. But I also wish people knew how resourceful, how intelligent, how I've learned so much from folks over the years that I've worked with that have been in circumstances I hope to never be in, but also know that it's not something that couldn't happen to any of us. And just also knowing, a lot of folks, especially chronically homeless folks that I've worked with, that home has never been a safe place. And so there's that little subset of people too, where maybe they've never even experienced that stability in the first place and don't know how to mirror and build that life because they've struggled, to even have a stable home when they were children. And so I was really happy to see that there was somebody on the panel with experience with foster kiddos and those types of issues, because I think, we don't realize sometimes that a lot of these things can be a product of not investing in children and investing in people that have experienced trauma and addressing those needs as they rise up, and not having one size fits all solutions for people, because we don't have any people that are the same. So why do we think that we can develop these processes and that everybody's going to go through a cookie cutter and come out in the same, that's kind of a metaphor, but I just think that I've learned a lot. I've been honored to get to know people to the level that I have. And I think that, like Scott said, these are just people that are down on their luck and need support. And, I just think sometimes people don't know how resilient and how strong people are that are in these situations, because most of us couldn't spend a day, without having some kind of reaction or feeling overwhelmed with some of the circumstances these folks are facing.
Liz, thank you. Amanda?
Yeah, my experience during our time of homelessness, we actually met up with some family members that were traveling, and they didn't know that we were homeless. They just offered to take us to dinner. So we were like, all right, nice meal. And when we got there, it was a beautiful restaurant, and they had some art called Pictures of Homelessness on the walls there. And I remember the female of the couple we were with, they're probably in their 60s. We're chatting and everything, and she looked at those photos and said, get a job, without realizing that the two people she's at dinner with are without a home. So just the feeling of humiliation was so prevailing throughout the entire experience. Like, I don't want to smell bad. I want to have my bangs looking nice every day. I don't want my hair to be greasy. I want to be able to wear my lipstick and jewelry, but it's just not always possible. Like I said, it is such a full-time job to find shelter, to be awake and alive and a functioning human. Like, I wonder if many people thought, like, if you had to take a U-Haul truck with you to work every day of all your belongings, would it be very easy for you to get a job and maintain that job? because most of the people I know, they have a garage full of junk, but nobody sees that at work. Nobody sees that when they go out for lunch. It's a lot easier to hide all the things you want to just keep put away. But there's this vulnerability of being homeless that is, if you have any type of substance use problem, it's visible. A lot of people just go home after work and do it privately. But if you're using substances, even not to a degree that's harmful, it appears, what a drunk, just the vulnerability and the trauma itself of being homeless, being that exposed on top of whatever trauma was there long ago, or just the trauma that led to, like you may even be working and just unable to maintain paying rent, or we were in another situation where we were able to stay with family, but we had medical bills that were so high that we had to choose, are we going to pay rent or are we going to pay medical bills? And I don't think a lot of people consider that the person you're looking at might just have a load of bills and like not have the resources to do all the normal things that the rest of the world does.
So I'm hearing a lot of, I guess, empathy and understanding, and really seeking first to understand the human, the person that's standing in front of you, who you're talking to, and the things that they've walked through or the things that they might be walking through. I've heard a lot of people, you say it's not one cause, it's not one reason, there's not one path to getting out of homelessness. There's each individual story and each individual person addressing the needs and the barriers that they might have, but you have to get to know that person to be able to help address those barriers. So I had someone tell me once that one of the number one reasons for homelessness is a loss of family or loss of significant relationships in your life. And just listening to each of you say that or talk about the different things you are, that's what I'm hearing a lot of, is it's that that supportive, or those people around you, your circumstances change. You might have been in an unsafe situation and you had to leave, and it caused the homelessness that got you to where you are, and then things spiraled out of control from there. So it's just interesting to listen and to hear your stories. So we have some people on here. Are there any questions from people that are on the call? Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? All right, I'm not seeing any, but please think through it. If you have some, go ahead and type them into the chat and we'll work on those. But I do have another question for our panelists at this point. So what are the key things that make a difference in enabling a person to move from living unsheltered to living housed? How do we walk alongside and help someone becoming unsheltered to being housed?
I'll just go from my experience and what I've seen. I think we've already covered it, but two of the biggest things to enable them is, I said it earlier, I'm saying it again because I don't think you can overstate it, but telling somebody who's lost their self-worth that they're important, tell them that God has a better plan for you than living out here in this. Sometimes that really affects people in a way that is profound. And I didn't start out doing it on purpose, but I realized that self-affirmation, they don't have a lot of positivity in their life and they're always getting, looked down like we talked about. But to have somebody tell them that they're worth it and they have better in store for them has really turned a spark and turned a light on in some people's eyes. And they realize that, hey, somebody else believes in me. Maybe I can start to believe in myself, because that self-loathing that comes with addiction, nobody wants to be an addict. But it's one of those things they constantly battle. And to hear some self-worth or dignity given back to them really is a powerful thing. And the other thing I think, at least for us, is, and what I realized quickly, is anybody who comes homeless within the first couple days or weeks, almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody loses their identification and they lose their documents to tell who they are. And a lot of us, myself included, take for granted what that means just in everyday life. I did not realize what that does to a person, but they can't get a hotel, they can't get any kind of benefits, they can't even think to go apply for a job. without that identification problem. And it's a very hard process to get that ID. That very first thing is getting that documentation of stating who they are. That's hard to do sometimes. They need so many other different supporting documents. So that's a huge first step. I know it may seem small to some of us, but it's a giant first step for them to get moving back into society. Some of them haven't had their IDs or license in decades, and getting that brings a sense of dignity and self-worth back to them. Just having that, the joy sometimes it brings in somebody getting an ID. And we've got a really good program getting people. DPS has worked with us to get a kind of front of the line pass. If we can get some supporting documents to get that ID process going, it's been a huge benefit. And we just got a donation, and we're getting a van purchased, and the whole purpose of the van is to be helping folks get those documents quicker and more timely, and hopefully a lot more available to a lot more clients. So it's going to be a really great program. We're starting here soon to go along with the ID process we've already been doing, which is a giant step for them.
Yeah, I can't say enough in support of what Scott said. I think part of what we want to do in street outreach, right, is to restore dignity to people who are living outside. And I think all of us in our daily life want to matter to somebody, to something, to someone. And it's amazing the power of looking someone in the eye and shaking their hand, whether, you know, some of the dirtiest hands that I've had the privilege of shaking, and just look at people's and have a conversation. How you doing? And then you go back in 2 weeks and you have another conversation. What's going on since the last time I see you? Tell me more about that. And those relationships are what enable people to move forward. It's the relationships that they lack often, like you had said, Michelle, and the social capital that has fallen away, that they got where they are. So often it's that. And so rebuilding those relationships with people and restoring dignity and walking with people through this process and through the housing process, but it can't end there because they can't maintain it by themselves for a while. And yeah, I've had people say I couldn't sleep in the bed for weeks, even though it was in that other room. I haven't had a bed in 10 years. And another guy that would wake up every night, he would go out and he'd scream on his balcony because he was waiting for the DART train to go over his head, and the noise wasn't there anymore. It was so quiet he couldn't stay. But having folks that would just keep checking on him, how you doing? Just want to know what's going on. And you see them, they will panhandle in places where they were panhandling before because they don't have their benefits yet. I don't understand how we put people on housing, but they don't have any money to stay in housing. Their rent is paid, but they don't have money to buy groceries. Or they get food, but they don't have can openers because the housing placement person didn't give it to them for 2 weeks. We are still setting people up to go figure out a way to get money when the resources that we've had to put them in don't support just living until they get disability or until they get Social Security. So they end up going back to the places that they were panhandling to buy a chicken sandwich from McDonald's, to buy some of the basic things. Our system needs to be set up so we support them as a fully functioning human when we're walking with them through the process and when we place them. If to give them a chance to be able to build on what stability they're given to continue that, or they're going to end up unhoused again for so many of the folks that we work with. It's just a really complicated process that, and because it's complicated, there isn't one way to do it. And so for agencies who are blessed enough to be able to have a flexible program, the success rate goes up. If you are pigeonholed and can only do so much and have really firm boundaries and strong place and strong programs that are specific on when you can stop helping and when you can start helping, the folks can't fit in that box very well. And so it's hard for them to get help. So that's a really long way of saying, I think it is the relationships and the and the human capital that we have as people who are stable to provide and walk beside the people who are not, and to not leave them at the apartment door, but to keep going back until they can do some of that for themselves.
I love that. The social capital, human capital is so important. Volunteers, people that can walk alongside our staff and just come and wrap around some of the individuals that we're serving and helping. It's so key and so important with all of our agencies, I know. I'm going to jump to a couple questions from the panelists, and then we might go, Amanda and Liz, I may have you jump in and answer that question here in a minute, but one of the questions was addressing the rising cost of housing and rent control. And Amanda, I see you, I think your answer in the chat might be addressing some of that. Is that true? Okay. So I'm going to let her response answer that, because I don't know that our panelists have the right. Does anybody have an answer to that? Because I don't know that we have an answer to that at this point.
I think being more involved in terms of legislation is something that is hard for frontline workers to do, but also at the same time, I feel like if we are involved, we're able to relay frontline information. So I think that's a challenge sometimes in trying to have that connectivity. I was going to just bring up the fact that too, and I know a lot of us are trying to work with really high caseloads, and so trying to maintain that level of individuality and connectivity can be a challenge. And I just want to say too, to kind of counter some of the conversation around like sanitariness and smelliness and things like that. Like, I have met several people that I've worked with that are much cleaner than my husband's musician, so I'm just going to pick on him. But like the band, I have a tougher time hanging out with them than I do doing street outreach. There's a lot of people that are still manage to stay clean and find showers no matter what the means are. So I think some of it too, and it can kind of bite us in the foot or the neck, I don't know, something. I'm trying to think of the expression. Is that, you know, this problem that we're trying to address is also forced into invisibility. It's criminalized, it's judged harshly by society. So really, even in trying to address the problem, we push people, you know, to hide it. So that's just something I wanted to add. But I rent control, I feel like we all need to go with the United Way on Capitol Hill Day and just say, stop it.
No, and I would say that, just going back to that with Liz, I would say United Way, boards of nonprofits, different, that's where some of that advocacy can happen. Because I can say, speak with Liz, agree with her in that the frontline staff, we want to go fight these things. We want to go voice our opinions and get policymakers to change their policies and things like that. But the time, we're already running such high caseloads and such high, working with so many individuals and doing what we can to meet the needs of the community, that sometimes that is not our first priority. But United Way does a great job supporting our staffs of the nonprofits in doing that. And then boards, I think the board members of other nonprofits, things like that, there's ways that you can get involved. So ask how you can support the nonprofits in our area doing what we do. And I promise you, we probably all have a list of about 100 things that you can do to support and walk alongside us as we serve the community members here. So one more question that came in was what the demographic, talking a little bit about the demographic profile of the unsheltered homeless that we have worked with here. Can somebody speak to demographics a little bit?
Personally, the number one reason that a female or child is homeless is domestic violence. So I don't know about the services in Denton and, you know, identifying different groups, but you may not see it because, you know, they're couch surfing or they're staying in their car, or they're trying to keep it together, you know, keep kids going to school, you know, keep going to your job. But the primary reason for females and children is domestic violence.
And Amanda, that's kind of why I brought up the that kind of segues into what I was saying about a lot of people being afraid to say they're experiencing homelessness, because if you have kids, that can start a CPS investigation. Potentially, there's a lot of, same with an outcry for domestic violence. Sometimes that can spur a CPS investigation. So a lot of our systems kind of are set up to punish or to, to basically focus on what the problem is rather, or the presenting issue rather than the person. And so I agree with you 100%. I know in the Veteran Service Office, we've seen a really big increase in aging adults. We have a large amount of folks that we're working with living with disabilities, physical and mental health. And so maybe some of those veterans are a little more isolated because of things that they experienced during service, or they just were workhorses and kept, to themselves, had a 9-to-5, never had to sign up for benefits, never needed to seek resources. And usually it's an emergency by the time we're getting people in, and we're just seeing a large increase. Nikki's in the room, so if y'all keep seeing me look over, that's why my coworker, she, we're seeing an increase in the aging population with the baby boomers, Vietnam era veterans, kind of being isolated without a lot of support. We also are seeing an uptick in female veterans experiencing homelessness. That's a priority. The VA has acknowledged that they've seen a growth in that population. So I would say those are the two that we really notice is elderly folks or people living with physical and mental health issues.
I think the other thing, just piggybacking on what Amanda said, is for youth. So youth is 18 to 24 years old. The predominance of problems that we see with youth out on the street is sexual identification, and that family members have basically thrown them away. They're the most vulnerable population out there because they're not really adults, but they are adults, but they're not really kids. So they don't fit in a kid system, which is why the federal government, have them classified with that very specific age. And when I was running transitional living centers in Dallas for homeless youth females, it was amazing just the number of youth that were coming in whose parents just couldn't grapple with the fact that their own kids were struggling with sexual identity issues, and they just wouldn't have them in their homes. They just wouldn't do it. And it wasn't any different from the other youth serving agencies that were serving homeless youth that were out on the street. I think in terms of the demographics here, it's interesting because we're smashed in between two COCs. Half of our service area belongs in THN, and the other half belongs in Housing Forward, which used to be called Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance. And so if you look at your demographics from the PIT count for the last several years, and you look at the predominance of males versus females and the age range, and then demographics with race, we're almost a perfect half of each one of the PIT counts. Our males and females are just about equal. When you look at African Americans that are predominantly overrepresented in the population, you will see that again, just about 50-50 in the population that we serve here in this area. So it's like we have folks that come down from Denton County, and we have people coming up from Dallas County, and they kind of meet in the middle. So our demographics are skewed. If Scott or Leah, who's working in that data all the time, just starts looking at what you see in Denton County, you could it's almost a guarantee that we will look, we will mirror half of your demographics because of where we sit in our service area. So it is very interesting.
Scott, anything specific on demographics and people you see?
No, just thinking about it, it seems pretty evenly split. We see so many more females out there than I would have guessed, I guess, not knowing. So it's pretty evenly split, guys, girls, black, white. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of gap in who we see out there.
Well, in age, you see all across the board, correct?
Yeah, we see all across the board. See a lot of young folks out there, but I also see guys in their 60s, been out there for 40 years. So yeah, we get a lot of the in between. So
Okay. All right, so Leah posted over in the chat the demographic. United Way does a really good job helping us gather and post that information for you. So she posted the link to the stats on the United Way dashboard. You can see a lot about the demographics and things there. I do want to just circle back real quick with Amanda. She talked about families. I think one of the things is you don't see families the way you do individuals. You don't notice them as often because of the different ways. So it doesn't mean that homelessness isn't happening for single moms and kids or families out there. It just means it looks different. And so just keeping, your eyes open and really treating a person for who they are and understanding who they are, because you don't know what someone's walking through. Even standing in front of you at the grocery store, you just don't know what someone's walking through. So just being eyes open and aware. Mary Jones put a comment or a question over here. I think it's very hard for the general public to know what to do, even if they want to help, when they see someone panhandling or they see someone out that they know is homeless. What is one thing that you would tell us we can do to be helpful and proactive in that situation?
The first thing I can suggest is, like some of the other panelists have said, is to treat that person like a human. You don't have to look away, even if you don't have money. I don't have an experience of actually panhandling myself, but don't look away just because you're uncomfortable or you don't have money or you don't know what to say. It just feels more demeaning to just have someone look away than to even greet you like a person and treat you with dignity.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, if individuals are called, they feel called to help, I think you look toward the agencies that are doing the work and you look at your own resources, right? Because we can all use time, treasure, and talent. I have 14 amazing volunteers who are out on the streets every single week that are restoring dignity and trying to help the folks that live in our area. And some of them I don't know if they give monetary donations, but what they do is they give a lot of time and they give gas and they drive their cars. And that is stuff that as an agency, you can't replace that. I mean, so if people are called to do that, I think that you give treasure, if that's your thing, to an agency that is working very hard to come up with solutions and to meet people out on the streets where they are. And if that isn't where you are, give time. And there's a lot of talented people out there who have skills that I'll never, ever have, that could walk with somebody, teach them something that I can't do. So I think there's a lot of ways to get involved that doesn't require writing a check. And it doesn't necessarily require going on the street and meeting people out there, because everybody has their own individual place where they can provide support.
Yes, go there and help those organizations already doing it. I won't get into it too much, but I feel pretty strongly about the panhandling. I think the average person would be amazed if they knew how much money people were making on the street panhandling. And at least in Denton, and I'm sure it's across the country, but there's been a giant uptick in people panhandling because a lot of money is given out in the street corners, but that's not money that's helping those folks at all. So I don't want to preach too much on it, but handing out money in the street corner is generally not a good idea. And it just enables folks to not go seek the help they need to fix some of the problems that they're having.
Yeah.
Giving too much free stuff on the corner isn't healthy for them or for anybody, in my opinion.
There's only about 25% of the people out there panhandling that are truly unsheltered homeless folks.
I would say too, to tap in with your local street outreach team. I remember I would get all kinds of weird donations, like a lot of shampoo and conditioner, like endless amounts. but I'd never had enough bug spray. I never had enough. There were certain things during the year that I would just beg for them all year long because I knew that they were harder to get. So I say, ask the people doing the frontline work what they need. I also say, if you can't help yourself, and you really do want to give somebody something, I used to just have a few like $5 gift cards or $10 gift cards. $5 doesn't get you very far. So maybe a $10 gift card that you can give somebody that's like, very common, so that they can, because I do feel like there is a value in being able to give somebody something and they can go pick what they need. But I know that's not the most popular opinion, but I agree with Scott too. I understand there isn't a subset of people that use this as a career, but I'd say if you had to, I wouldn't give cash because it's not very safe. I would just give a gift card to a restaurant or a gas station or something like that if you're really wanting to provide something to somebody. But generally I just keep water in my car and a spare of socks, and if I see somebody, I'll just offer them a water. There's basic things you can keep, but I would stay away from the shampoo and conditioner. I'm pretty traumatized by those hygiene kits. So just asking, because we get a little overloaded with that stuff, and we'd rather people spend, if they're going to want to contribute, asking what is the need versus what they might think the need is, because those can be two totally different things.
Well, I think, Liz, I appreciate each of you sharing that, because I think that is key, that you guys are out there day in, day out. You are seeing the needs, you're hearing the needs. And so I would just reiterate to anyone that's watching or listening is go to the people that are on the front lines and ask what the needs are. Bug spray is huge. I know we had snake bites or bug bite things. Like we had things like that a common every day, you might not think about that, but those things are important for us to have when we go out to encampments, or going out to visiting people that are out there and sheltered. So ask us what it is that is needed, go to the agencies that are there. And then I'm just going to say a couple quick things. I know on our website, and I would say on most of the websites, there's probably links for people that need help, but I know specifically on the Giving Grace website, there is a link for someone else needs help. And that is what we utilize for our street outreach team. If there is someone you see someone that might be experiencing homelessness, you can go to that someone else needs help link, and you can complete that form, and our street outreach team or our team will then contact and do what they can to help that person or find out what those needs are for the individual that's out there. So make sure to check out the websites for the other agencies if you ask what the need is and go for there. It kind of leads to our next question, which is for you guys, is what can individuals do to help? Which we talked about that a little bit. Mary kind of led into that, but what can individuals actually do to help us as organizations or to help people out there that are living unsheltered? Is there anything different or new that you'd like to share here?
I think, sometimes we don't think about people's careers or things that they're doing as resources, but like just as an example, one of my friends that was doing marketing several years ago when I was doing street outreach with an organization, offered to help try to do a drive for us and helped kind of take the load off of me when I was doing street outreach. She has a much wider net with a lot more financial support than my net does. And so she was able to kind of pilot the Keep Denton Warm thing that comes around every year, because she said, I have these relationships with these businesses and I can get people to run around and pick up all the coats from the different spots because I know you're going 10 different directions. So being able to kind of delegate and partner with people in areas that their expertise is a value and letting them kind of help, or I've heard other people talk about mentoring Like you have this skill set. I think Melanie mentioned that you can share with another person. Like there's all different ways to be creative with resource sharing, and it doesn't necessarily involve somebody coming in and doing what your job is. It may be helping you, consolidate your data better to be able to ask for more funds. There's all different ways that people can get plugged in. So I would say, if somebody's interested, start where their strong suit is and plug them in a place where they're going to be able to use that, because they're more likely to stay engaged with you if it's something they feel comfortable volunteering doing. Whereas if I tried to maybe get somebody to do street outreach that didn't feel comfortable, maybe just didn't even like talking to people generally, housed or unhoused, that wouldn't be a good place for me to plug them in.
There are definitely millions of places to get involved at different nonprofits and different services out there. There's different ways to get involved. So if you are passionate or want to help in this way, reach out to the agencies that are here and ask the questions as to how you can get involved, because there are ways that we can get you plugged in. I keep hearing more and more. We talked a lot about human capital and people. To have human capital, you have to have people, right? We have to have more volunteers. We have to have more people to actually be that human capital. But I will kind of go back to where Scott said, and we've said multiple times, reach out to the agencies that are doing the frontline work and ask, because we can get you plugged in. We can find the place that you fit. But it's best to go through and to work with us, because then we're all working with the same goals and the same initiatives and the same line and the same moving forward. So we're working together. So reach out to the people that are here and the agencies that are here. So
actually, outside of agencies, something you can do is just get to know your neighbors, like get to know your own street, the kids that are in your child's class at school, just the ways that you can serve them individually by being that community, because that crumbling community is one of the first, devastating parts of living without a home. But also you might be able to recognize stress, like, hey, have your kids come over after school this week every day. That would give you some time to focus on whatever it is you need to do. Or even becoming like foster parents, or being able to foster as a kinship placement for a friend of your child or someone in your neighborhood. That way they don't lose that connection, which just spirals deeper and deeper into homelessness.
thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. I think we just have to be aware, good community members and be aware of the people that are around us. So they have shared on the screen here ways to get involved. It'll be, I'm assuming, on the website and on Facebook and all the different places with the links to Giving Grace, MetroCrest, the Veteran Services, Homeless Coalition, United Way. There are lots of ways to find us. So get onto these websites, check them out, ask questions. The Barriers Fund link is in there. There's ways that you can give. Barriers Fund is accessible to all the different agencies that are here to be able to help individuals, sometimes to address maybe identification, different things. We can access that and reduce those barriers to someone finding housing. So check out those links. I can't think of anything else. Am I missing anything else? Leah, Amanda, I know y'all weren't prepared to talk, but am I missing anything?
I would just to piggyback on your mention about the Barriers Fund. Absolutely, we've discussed many great ways to get involved without monetary donations. But if you are considering a donation, that is one of the resources that can be donated to that benefits all of our agencies and those that really need that support to move into housing.
And the Barriers Fund is a source of last resort, which means that it funds things for which there is no other money to fund them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank
And I
you, Mary.
appreciate you bringing that up, Mary, because we need those opportunities as agencies to find resources. As Melanie mentioned earlier, sometimes the people don't fit in the box. And so we need some outsized resources to be able to access. So I think that's really important to have, and we appreciate that. So okay, well, thank you all. There were several people on here. We appreciate you jumping on. We appreciate the questions that were asked. This will be shared and live. So if you think it will benefit someone else to hear or to see it, please feel free to share. Thank you, panelists, for being on and sharing your hearts for those we get to serve on a daily basis. So thank you all very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you
Thank
to the
you.
panelists and to Michelle for being such a great moderator. This has been a good session. Thank you.
All right, you guys have a great night or great day.
You too.